Welcome to Thunder Nerds. I'm Brian Hinton.
I'm Sarah Veslow.
And I'm Frederick Philip von Weiss, and thank you for consuming the Thunder Nerds, a conversation with the people behind the technology that love what they do.
And do tech
Good. Ha! And we're doing Tech Good here at DevFest Florida 2019.
Yep.
Brian, where are we at actually here?
Orlando, Florida, at this amazing place that we've determined the name might be
Oviedo. Yes, Oviedo Mall. I'm going to trip on it every time.
You
Whatever
got
they
it.
call this place.
And we're here with Faisal Abid. Welcome.
Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, thanks for coming on the show. We just had a conversation the other day, and I'm happy to have you on again. Yeah. So, what have you been up to since then?
Preparing for my talk. Really.
Yeah, that's what I figured.
Back to back. So just preparing for them and making sure the notes and everything, code samples work.
Yeah.
That's what I was busy with.
Yeah, I imagine you were really busy with that. Yeah, doing two talks. For our audience that might not know you, tell us a little bit about you and what you do.
I'm a Google developer expert. In my professional life, I am a co-founder at a company called dydx. We do API monitoring, but when I talk and stuff, it's more around Google developer expert, which basically means I talk about Flutter, Android, machine learning, and then sometimes I'll do non-Google related topics like decentralized apps, Bitcoin and stuff. But that's when, we were all getting rich off cryptocurrency. And now we're all poor. So I'm not talking about that anymore. Yeah.
You still have a lot of Bitcoin left?
Yeah, I do. It's there. I'm holding.
Eventually, you never know.
One day.
You never know. What about what was the Facebook one?
Libra.
Yeah.
Oh, that's dead.
Yeah.
Is it dead?
Yeah.
It's a car crash.
It's gone.
Oh, I didn't realize that was dead already.
I mean, it's Facebook. Are you gonna trust Facebook?
No,
I
but that's why I was so interested in it. Going like, are they really gonna do that? I guess not.
No, handing them your money.
Yeah, that would be so weird. Yeah.
Why are you looking at me?
Do you think it's weird?
He doesn't trust me with money.
Do you think it's weird?
That? He's like, I wouldn't give Sarah.
No, I was gonna ask you, looking at you because I was gonna see if we could talk about his talks.
I'm ready. You are.
Oh, yeah.
You ready? All right, we're ready.
Let's go.
So, what you talk about today?
The first talk.
Oh, what are your talks about?
Yeah, first talk was building Flutter apps. And,
Woo!
and
Sorry, I like that topic.
And it was around just learning what Flutter is, how to actually go ahead and build a Flutter app, and the pros and cons of building a Flutter app. I try to not to be religious about it, but I try to break it down. So it's here's when you should use Flutter and here's when you shouldn't. So that was the first talk. And then the second talk was an experimental talk around machine learning, which was getting started with machine learning, and not in terms of understanding the code or anything, but understanding where to even begin to learn. A lot of people that I meet, including myself many years ago, always ran into the issue of, well, I need to install Python, I need to install TensorFlow and stuff, and then you don't know what to do. Or sometimes you can't even get those things installed, right? And so just trying to break it down into a digestible chunk on what to do first, where to go. If you like reading books, this is the book you should read and stuff like that. Yeah, both talks went well.
So with the Flutter talk, tell us some of these advantages that you're talking about.
So the advantage of Flutter is really Flutter is controlling the viewport there, right? So if you think about it like Unity for games, Unity for apps. So when you develop a Flutter app, it's going to look the same on all devices. Doesn't matter if the device is 5 years old or milked by Samsung or running in an emerging market. It's going to look the same and behave the same, right? So think of it as the Flash player done right. And I'm sure Google probably hates that analogy.
That's a bad analogy.
Yeah. But I say because it's digestible. Yeah, no, it's digestible.
Flash revolutionized the web.
Exactly. So you're taking that, but you've learned those lessons, right?
Yeah,
and so
exactly.
It's open source. It's built in public. There's no closed gardens around this. And so when you're building a Flutter app, it's going to last for a while. Nothing lasts forever, but it's going to last for a while. And you're going to get good performance because Google's working really hard to ensure it runs 60 frames per second on all devices. So leave it up to them to make sure their rendering engine works. And the rendering engine that powers Flutter is the same rendering engine that powers Chrome. right? At the base layer, it's the same Skia rendering engine.
Oh, okay.
So it's not a direct, they're not fetching from Chrome every time, but it's the same technology that they're using. So they know it's low powered, they know it's fast. Chrome runs absolutely everywhere.
Yeah.
And so it's that base technology. It's not a web view, but it's that same rendering engine.
Yeah, one thing I was curious about with the 60 frames per second, I couldn't find anything about it. I'm curious if you know. What happens with that with displays that are like 90 hertz? Like,
Yeah.
what's it doing?
So right now, I read actually a GitHub issue about this. Right now, there isn't anything specifically planned to support it. I'm sure they're working on it simply because it's Pixel 4, but it will just behave like a normal app, right? So if you play with the Pixel 4, only certain apps are optimized for 90 frames per second.
Yeah.
And the other ones just look like a normal app.
Okay.
Yeah.
That makes sense. I accept that answer.
What do you tell people that that haven't used Flutter before? This is the definite advantage. I know you've heard these things, and maybe people talk about I use React, and I'm not going to get away from this. What would you tell them?
So I tell them, if you're comfortable with React, use React Native, right? The big advantage of Flutter is that it's gonna run the same on all devices. The problem with React Native very often is it'll run great on iOS. On Android, on large numbers of devices, it's gonna start behaving weird, right? Because the way React Native fundamentally works is it says, this is a JavaScript button, and I'm running on Android, so I'm gonna create an Android button, right? But the problem with Android is it's so fragmented that on an HTC phone, it can your button will have unusual padding. So there was a company that invited me to just do some consulting to understand that they had built a React Native app, and they have like 500 million users. And they kind of deployed this app in the Philippines. And what happened there was their app ran really badly, right? And the UI just looked pretty bad. And that wasn't good for them because they have a lot of users. And so they started wondering why. They were using Pixels, but phones in the Philippines were really weird. Right? And so they ran into all sorts of issues there. And this is the same issue you run into when you're doing native Android development, right? And so Flutter kind of takes away that and abstracts it away by just drawing all the components.
No, this is because, as you said, like a lot of these phones, they'll put their own stuff on top of it.
Yeah.
And
if the whole world ran on
things.
Exactly, the whole world ran on iOS, none of this would be an issue.
Right.
But thankfully it doesn't.
So he's like, yep.
Exactly.
She doesn't like iOS.
No, I don't like it either. But because of the fragmentation of Android, which is a pro and a con, you run into weird issues here.
Yeah.
And Flutter Web and Flutter Desktop.
Yes.
And I feel like there's one more I'm missing.
Yeah, so Flutter Web is coming. It's still in early preview, which means you can take your Flutter code and deploy it to the web. Right?
Love that.
With some caveats that you're not hooking into like the system stuff like the contact book or the Viber.
Oh, of course, it's the web,
Exactly. But if you can get away from all that, you can deploy it. It's coming to desktop also, so you can just, again, do the same thing on desktop. So it's very clever, which is why I use the Flash analogy, because it is a lot like that in theory, where as long as we build a rendering engine, the code will run. Right? So that's what they're doing.
What's with the name? So I'm going to be dead honest. This is the first time I've heard Flutter. Like the name Flutter was today. So I feel like I have a really good idea of what it is now. Where did the name come from?
I'll tell you where the name comes from. Are you guys ready?
No.
All right. This is where the name comes from. And this was said behind, so I was at a conference, a Dart conference.
Wait, you should pause for a second.
Yeah.
Just pause. Okay, go ahead.
Okay. So what happened was I was at the Dart conference, and during the breaks, they would turn off the cameras. When they turned off the cameras, someone asked this question, and they said, all right, we'll tell you. So really no one outside this conference knows.
Oh, how funny.
Okay.
And so here's where the name comes from. Originally, it was called Sky, and that was a code name. And they needed a name for it. And so Google opened up what I assume a Google spreadsheet, went through the names of all the companies that acquired, and to save on legal paperwork and trademarks, not to buy a new domain and stuff, they had a domain called Flutter. Flutter Dev. And so they said, great, let's use this.
Yeah.
You know,
that's a good name.
It is a good name.
Yeah, it's a great name. And I'm sure they thought about it, but they didn't want to spend money buying trademarking a new name.
Leverage what we already have.
Flutter is Flutter was a gesture company that Google bought in like 2004 or something. So they kind of had that trademark and domain and stuff. And that's where the name comes from.
Wow, that's crazy.
Imagine the people who had that kind of like, what? Like, what? That's not at all what this was before.
Exactly.
That's weird.
Yeah. But that it actually works out perfectly, I think, because it's like, Flutter, it's able to go over here and work here.
Yes.
So it'll go over here and work.
Really?
So, yeah.
I don't know. I think of Fluffernutter, so I just kind of start thinking.
Flutter goes to Fluffernutter.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah,
You
I
don't
think.
think of Fluffernutter?
Yeah, I don't see
I don't even know what that is.
No.
Fluffernutter?
Explain.
Yes.
God,
Go ahead.
it's
Go ahead.
peanut butter and fluff
Oh,
in a
okay.
sandwich.
What's fluff?
It's marshmallow.
Marshmallow.
Okay, there you go.
Marshmallow bread. Fluffernutter.
Fluffernutter.
Delicious sandwich.
Yeah.
Speaking of Fluffernutter,
We're
let's talk
learning
about
so
machine
much
learning.
here.
Yes.
Yeah, so machine learning for everyone.
Yeah.
Even Brian?
Even Brian.
Eh,
Everyone.
okay.
Everyone.
I thought we got off the mean wagon. Jeez.
I wasn't getting on the mean wagon. I just
Okay.
went, come on. Right. So yeah,
It's
tell
mean
us
if you've
what.
done it to me, just assuming I'm not technical enough.
Right, exactly. Which I never would. I don't want to get hit. But tell me about it.
Yeah, so this topic was around the struggles a lot of developers face when they try to get into machine learning. It was what I call an experimental talk, where I kind of thought about, instead of going over code samples and stuff, when you go to a lot of machine learning talks, it kind of assumes you know what a lot of these things are. It kind of assumes you know what classification means or linear regression, or here's a code sample, here's where we're passing some images and this is what's happening. And so I wanted to take it even one step before.
I'm cracking up because I don't know why Brian's laughing.
Yeah.
I don't know why he's laughing either. I'm sorry.
Long day, long day. Okay.
You're really interesting.
He's getting all red. Yeah.
Yeah, he's like a lobster right now.
Just go off screen because you're really distracting. Keep going.
So did I say
Sorry,
something?
Faisal.
No, he's
Yeah.
doing one of those things where he's thinking of something funny and he's just losing
I
it.
see.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he's losing it.
I see. So a lot of developers run into this issue. So my whole talk was around how to get around that barrier.
Uh-huh.
And a couple of questions I did just before the talk, I found out that a lot of developers had installed.
Stop!
Just
What
leave.
are you doing? Sorry, what Brian's having a mental breakdown.
Having a moment.
What the fuck? Sorry, Faisal.
No problem. So a lot of developers I had asked, even during the talk, they said they installed TensorFlow, and which is not usually the first thing you should do, even when you're trying to learn machine learning. They install TensorFlow only because you're hearing it from in the media and Google. And well, it doesn't run their machine properly, or it's slow, and they get kind of flustered and they give up, right? And so I kind of, peeled it back and I said, here's the resources you should go to. Here's the high-level concepts, and you should learn the intuition.
Right.
Because sometimes they'll learn about like here's unsupervised learning, and they don't know, well, when should I use this, right? So, and it's kind of daunting with all these different ways to do machine learning. So I took it a step back and I said, well, you should think about your problem and your data set and stuff. So that was the experimental talk. It was well received. I had a lot of people come up, talk about it. So yeah.
But when you said think about your problem, like what do you mean, for example?
So a lot of people think machine learning is a silver bullet. We can just like kind of throw it at any problem and it'll fix it. But you really need to understand where the data is coming from.
Okay.
Right. And try to like massage your data and understand your data. So even build intuition when you're looking at the data. Right. And so I showed some tools where you can easily do that and look at stats in your data set and learn about, well, it looks like my data set is actually just like consists of 0 and 1s, right? Or my data set is a bunch of ages. What's the average age? And what algorithm should I use based on the data I see? And so, because a lot of machine learning, once you understand the intuition, it's a lot of art, which seems wild when you think about it in terms of the deterministic programming we do. But it's not really, because even when you think of the current traditional programming, that in itself is an art where you could use, for example, before HTML5 came around, you could just use write plain JavaScript, but there was jQuery, and we had to really understand, have an intuition of when to use jQuery and when not to. So it's the same with machine learning, where once you start using it, you build an intuition, and then that's the art form of it, where I should use this algorithm or the other one.
Yeah, that's so interesting. Okay, so what are some of the takeaways then that you really want people to get from this talk?
Number one, don't jump to TensorFlow right away.
Okay.
It's very PR driven, but don't do that. Try going to scikit-learn, which I'm sure the data scientists will beat me up outside in the parking lot for saying this, but scikit-learn is like jQuery for the machine learning world, right? Okay. Where it's kind of wrapped up all the algorithms very easily. And so as long as you have an intuition of which algorithm to use, you can pass in your data and very quickly get results back with scikit-learn. So it's cheap and fast. Whereas with TensorFlow, you're gonna, if you're going to do a lot of machine learning, you have to write a lot of code, or write less code but have a longer time to train because it's kind of running on a GPU, or you just have a large data set. Right?
Oh, I
so
see. Okay.
it's easier to learn and quickly iterate your understanding using scikit-learn, and then you can kind of progress and use TensorFlow when you want to use deep learning and stuff. A lot of people think machine learning equals deep learning, but it's sort of like a smaller field. So with machine learning, you can use scikit-learn. When it comes time to use deep learning, that's when TensorFlow excels. And that's really why TensorFlow was created in the first place at Google.
Yeah.
So what was it like actually preparing 2 talks at the same time?
Oh, yeah.
So the Flutter one, I can do in my sleep now. And so I've done that a lot of times. Yeah. I've kind of, and we talked about this last year too, and a couple of days ago, like Flutter one, I've designed the talk to be like a movie trailer.
Yeah.
Where it's just like this nice progression. And so I've kind of like memorized that talk really well. And most of my talks, actually, I never have notes. Even like the machine learning one. If I have notes for something, I'll feel like I have to follow a script.
Yeah, get distracted.
I get distracted.
Yeah.
And so I only do talks where I have like an intuitive understanding of the field, and then I can kind of take it anywhere as long as I have these slides to take me, to guide me, right? And so the Flutter ones I didn't have to prepare much, just kind of tweaking stuff based on new Flutter developments. The machine learning one kind of took me a week to just make sure that I'm forming it correctly. It's the first time giving this talk.
Oh, it is? Oh, how
So
cool. Okay.
It was just like making sure that I've kind of built a story around it. I try not to just go technical. I try to build a story. So the story was, really around, as a developer, you're getting started, you're getting stuck, right? And you hear all these like, you go on Hacker News, you see like deep fakes and stuff, and you wonder that you'll never get to that point. Learning on how to build all this, right? And so how to build a storyline there.
What was your what was the genesis of this talk? Why the interest in this topic?
Because I ran into issues. Most of my talks I try to do introduction talks for 2 reasons. Because when I get started, I run into all these roadblocks, and I kind of figure my way out. And so I want to reduce the time of other people running into those roadblocks. So I'll kind of just share that knowledge. I do advanced topics and workshops because I feel in 40 minutes you'll never be able to teach advanced stuff.
Yeah.
So I never try to show code. And just kind of build a storyline of getting started. So introduction to Flutter, machine learning for beginners. I did like introduction to Ethereum development and stuff. It's all about not running into roadblocks and me just like showing you the path.
I love that. Okay.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Doing a lot of talks myself, I feel like a lot of people feel this pressure to do like intermediate advanced talks. Like, oh, nobody wants to come to a beginner talk. So many people want these beginner talks. They need them. Even people that are at the intermediate, it covers things that they completely missed.
Yep.
So,
and I feel a lot of beginners conferences are very useful to them. Yeah. Once you kind of develop an understanding of the technology, you don't really go to conferences to learn more about it. Yeah. So you'll go to workshops and you'll take like 6-hour courses or something.
Yep.
And I feel like in the talk, you have pointers where you're like, if you want to go into more advanced things, go here. So you're basically acting as the compass of, how to reach, a more advanced goal and to learn it. Yeah.
And even if you're at a conference for a certain subject, and you're advanced in said subject, you might want to go just for something completely different.
Yeah.
There's a talk on this. I've always wanted to learn about that. Tell me more about this. Yeah. There's so much value in that. Flutter. Yes.
I love Flutter.
Flutter.
It's really cool.
Well, yeah, sure. Flutter.
I only like marshmallows. So.
The idea of marshmallow and peanut butter together is just gag worthy.
Yeah, it's really good.
I've never tried it.
I love peanut butter.
It's disgusting.
Yeah, it is really disgusting.
Peanut butter is gross?
No, marshmallow and peanut butter.
Oh, okay. But you like peanut butter?
Sure.
Okay.
Faisal, let me ask you a question. What do you do to prevent burnout? What is your way to get away from the screen? What do you do?
I think more watch movies. I don't get time to play games as much, but kind of watch movies a lot or TV shows. mainly movies. I'm a big movie guy.
Oh yeah.
And so I'll always try to like every week try to go to a movie or something.
Have you seen Interstellar now 20 times? Because last time we spoke, you saw it 5 times.
Yeah,
in
I've
one
seen
weekend.
that. I've seen it a lot more times. Yes, I did watch.
No,
it.
you didn't. You didn't watch it more.
No, I've seen it. So Dark Knight, Interstellar, and I think a couple other movies I kind of play in the background.
I do that a
Oh,
lot.
okay, yeah.
Not a
Yeah.
lot,
I
but
get
yeah,
you.
I'll just
Yeah.
play it in the background.
Mine is
Oh
pretty
yeah,
okay.
Batman versus Superman. That's something I'll play in the background a lot.
Nice.
Yeah.
That's
Batman
cool.
versus Superman, really?
Yes.
It's
I
so
did not
great
like
movie.
that movie.
So
Okay, I'm
many-
gonna get started on this if we have time.
Sure, please.
Go.
Release a Snyder cut. So basically, Batman Superman is a great movie.
Yeah.
The theatrical version was garbage.
Okay.
Okay.
Utter trash. So if you just watch it in theaters, it's garbage.
Oh, okay.
What they did was they kind of screwed up on the theatrical cut, but the director's cut kind of like ties the entire movie together.
Oh, tell us.
So
Okay.
when you watch the director's cut, you understand why actually Batman and Superman want to fight each other.
Mhm.
Because you never understand that in the theater, and I'm wondering why they want to fight the whole way. So you understand that, you understand the motivations of the bad guy and why Lex Luthor wants them to fight and everything. So director's cut, must watch.
Mhm.
Justice League was a total mess, which
Yeah.
is why I've only seen that movie once.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, the Superman mustache.
I understand, and that's really because
Bad CG.
that's really because
Uh,
Zack Snyder had to leave halfway. There's a mythical cut that exists called the Snyder Cut.
Uh-huh.
That is the entire Justice League movie done in Zack Snyder's vision.
Oh.
But
Yeah, they
but he
released it.
left. They never released it. It's been like 4 years, and there's still 3 years, and it's still like
They just
being
release-
talked about
just
it.
Release it.
you know what I think
Because
they're
it
gonna
doesn't
release
really
it.
exist.
They're gonna. I think
Probably
it does exist.
It does. They
I
have
think they'll
all the
release it
film.
on HBO Max because they want subscribers for that stupid
Ah,
streaming service.
Yeah.
Okay. But the cut for Batman vs Superman
It's really
is
you,
released?
you can watch it. It got released with Blu-ray, and so what's funny is some of the reviewers reviewed the theatrical version, gave it like a 10%, reviewed the director's cut and gave it like a 75-80. It's not the best movie, but it's a great movie to watch.
Is it supposed to be based on the Frank Miller comic?
Yeah,
isn't
and
it?
Ben Affleck's a great Batman.
You know, speaking of HBO Max, all the Studio Ghibli movies are going to be on HBO Max.
Yes.
All of them, the whole library.
What?
Yeah.
Oh,
We're
So-
going right back to cable. I now have
We are.
Netflix. I have Disney Plus because
Mhm.
Why Disney Plus?
Mandalorian and all the
cannot-
Simpsons episodes.
I
Nah.
cannot understand why. Like, so like I've got Netflix and I've
We'll
got
cancel my plans.
Amazon Prime. That's it.
Yeah, I have
And
Amazon Prime
is
too.
really for the packages. Like the videos
Yeah.
is like an extra. Like that's it. Disney Plus, don't care. If I care that
Ghibli
much, I'll
movies.
just buy it.
I'm gonna start pirating soon. Because that's what's gonna happen. We're going right back. So
You know you're
what we
being
need to,
recorded.
no, that's fine. It's fine. We're gonna need to go back to like the Kazaa Light days,
Yeah.
right? Because that's what's gonna happen. We're just going full circle.
Yeah, it is ridiculous, the cost. Yeah, I saw someone on Twitter, they were like, you know what would be great if someone took all these things, combined them into some sort of, I don't know, package.
Yeah, cable, exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
No,
Yeah.
no.
Which is gonna happen, and I'm
It's
sure.
gonna happen.
I'm
Yeah.
sure either
I don't
Google
want that.
or Amazon, one of these big guys, are gonna just make it kind of a deal.
Apple Plus.
Oh yeah, Apple One.
Well, I think they tried to do that with Apple TV. They tried.
Yeah,
I bet
yeah.
you behind the scenes they're trying to make
Yes.
deals.
I'm sure they're
and
trying
it didn't
to.
happen.
See, that's why I like Amazon.
Eventually.
I've got HBO.
Once
I've
everyone
got all
starts
these
losing
things.
money,
Yeah, exactly.
It's,
That's
it's
when
like
they're gonna
$2. Okay,
Yep.
I'll pay $2.
Yeah.
I've
Well,
got investigation discovery. Like, hello, that's all I need in my life.
Okay.
It's true.
What do you think of Apple TV Plus? Have you seen any of the shows?
no, I haven't. I've heard the Jason Momoa show is
C.
good. C is pretty
It's
good.
weird.
It's weird? Okay.
Yeah.
well, of course, it looks weird. It's all futuristic weirdness.
The one I want to see is I saw a clip for it, the M Night Shyamalan.
Oh,
Is
yeah.
it a movie or a
That does look
TV show? I'm not
I think
sure.
it's a show.
It's a
Yeah, I
show.
want to
You
watch
guys
that.
don't want to see the Reese Witherspoon?
No,
Jennifer
I've
Aniston
already
show?
watched that the morning show.
I
Yeah.
can't believe you didn't mention that one.
I
first.
was going to.
I haven't looked at it yet, honestly.
That
I
one.
heard about it
that
on
one
NPR.
was
It's the only reason
good.
why I know.
That was good, but I just don't like Jennifer Aniston. I don't think she's that good of an
Really?
actress. Like she just not when you
Yeah, but
put her
she's
next
like-
to
she's
Reese Witherspoon and
Yeah, but Jennifer Aniston is like
yeah.
Winona Ryder.
I can't see
Like
anyone but
always the
What?
same person. No,
Uh-oh.
always
No,
the
that's
same
true.
person.
She's always.
Yeah.
She's always the
Yeah.
same person. That's okay as long as you like that person.
Well, that's
Yeah.
that's like
Yeah.
George
No.
Clooney and Brad Pitt also. They
Yes.
always play the
Yes.
same
Oh,
guy.
yeah.
They're always
I
the
saw-
same guy.
I saw Ad Astra or whatever with Brad Pitt, and it's just Brad Pitt in space. It's
Yeah.
a good
Yeah.
movie, but it's Brad Pitt in space.
Brad
I've
Pitt.
been in space, yeah. I mean, if you look at like a real actor like Johnny Depp plays
Yes.
actual
Yes.
different
Yes.
characters.
Or Matthew
Very well.
McConaughey.
Different characters.
There's
Yeah.
a
Oh,
good
yeah,
Matthew
he's really
McConaughey
good.
movie that almost no one saw called Beach Bum.
Yeah.
That's really
Fantastic.
Good.
And
Mud.
Mud is great. Exactly.
That's
He plays
great.
What was the
different role.
detective?
True Detective.
True Detective. Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah.
So those are
Actually,
actors.
Excuse me, but do you know what his first role was?
Go ahead.
Unsolved Mysteries.
Was it?
Yes.
No idea.
He was on Unsolved Mysteries. It's my favorite episode.
Really?
Well,
Yes.
was he on Unsolved Mysteries? He played
So
like
he
Reenactment.
plays, he did a reenactment scene
Really?
of this guy. So it's this guy who ends up being a serial killer. Believe it or not, at the time that they did the Unsolved Mysteries episode, they had no idea that this guy was a serial killer. He was just like a perv who was flashing kids. Sorry.
This was
Jesus.
Matthew McConaughey.
Sorry, this kind of got really deep.
Yeah.
This was Matthew McConaughey.
No.
Oh, okay.
No, he's the guy. So this dirty old man gets out of a truck and is exposing himself. Matthew McConaughey is having none of it. And he goes out and tells him to get back in the car and he takes his keys. The guy gets out a shotgun and shoots him.
Oh no.
So there's this
Matthew dies?
unbelievable
He's
scene.
all right.
You gotta see it. It's like he's like, oh,
I wore that shirt.
oh, it's fantastic.
Did you?
It's
on
fantastic.
the last talk we did.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Just look it up. You know what?
Yeah.
We'll put the clip in the show notes.
Okay,
Yeah.
we will. Yeah, yes, we will.
We will. I know where to find it.
Okay.
We'll find. Sarah will find it. Well, that being said, how can people find out more about you?
Follow me on Twitter at Faisal Abid, or LinkedIn, or just email me. Honestly, just whatever. You can find my name anywhere.
Oh, and I love that you do this. This is worth mentioning that you actually put a link in your Twitter to where you could Calendarly.
Yeah, it's a Calendly link.
Office
Yeah.
hours?
Yeah,
Yeah.
office hours. Basically, if you want to talk about startups, movies, technology, anything that you think I might know, just like book a time with me and we can have a video chat. Or if you're local to Toronto, we can meet up for coffee.
I should Unsolved Mysteries
I'm just
episode.
gonna
I know a lot.
book some
You
talk
should.
about movies.
Sounds good. Let's do it. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
Cool.
excellent. Well, thank you so
Yeah.
much for joining
Yeah.
us. Yeah, appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks everybody for watching. We got a lot more coming up. Take care.